Hi, I'm Joyce Oglesby. Thanks for returning to this ongoing series of Getting Past the Past. We're on the final segment of A Fugitive in the Present. I prayed for you this week that you would benefit from the exercise of release that you did. It truly is helpful for you to have your past staring you in the face. I can tell you I like it a lot better when I stare it in the face. It no longer has a grip on my life because I surrendered it to God. If you missed any part of this series, visit the archives and grab you a cup of coffee. You're in for a treat. You'll recall that I went for a 3-day fast indulging in Charles Stanley's sermon series on forgiveness. Shortly after I got back from that 3-day fast, I asked Webby for yet another day. I began praying for my time to get down south and to look up family members one by one and have my little holy hoedown with them, I called it. It was a beautiful Saturday when I climbed into the car to drive down alone. I had prayed all week, as had Webby been in prayer for me. No one knew what I would be doing but the two of us. I didn't call the family to say, I'm coming down, I've got some things to say. In fact, my mother had recently finally divorced my dad and had moved out on her own with my sister. And my brothers were all married and scattered all over a 3-county area. It would take all day Saturday and probably most of Sunday to corral them all, but I was specific in how I wanted to handle this. I believe in praying for specifics. All I can do is what I can pray. That's my slogan for my Move a Mountain ministry and yet another book in the making. I asked Webby to pray for specifics. I wanted each one of my family members in the same place at the same time without their spouses and or their kids. It was a tall order, I'll assure you of that, but we're not talking about a God who can't part the Red Sea, you know. We're talking about a God who loves prayers for specifics. We're talking about the God of impossibles. So that morning, I drove out of Atlanta fully believing it would come to pass. I believed that God would do whatever it took to accomplish the mission. It was a beautiful day. Not a cloud in the sky from Atlanta all the way down to Valdosta, Georgia, which is not far from the Florida line. The forecast that day was for a gorgeous but hot late spring day. The windows were down, the radio off. I was praying as I drove down southbound 75. The 4-hour trip would be filled with conversation between the Lord and myself. I wouldn't rehearse the words to be spoken upon arrival. He would provide them. I was confident in my efforts. It had been bathed in much prayer. I was acting on free will alone, that same free will that had me claim my Gideon's Bible in school so many years before. It was the same free will that I tapped to study the scriptures by flashlight while hanging on to the hope that they offered me. It was the same free will that I had acted upon to pray my way out of a hopeless situation. Trust me, I was more than familiar with that free will. Now, a route to address encompasses a lot of territory, but I made my way to my mother's hot, small, unair-conditioned trailer out on the rural route that day. I pulled in. She and Kathy were so surprised to see me. To make a long story short, one by one, my brothers began to drive by my mother's trailer that day, spotted my Atlanta tag, and dropped in to see their sister. Before the hour was up, all 8 siblings were in the trailer, devoid of spouses and children. The last to show was, Junior. You got it, my dad. He had no business there whatsoever, but he'd made it his business to drop in on Mother many times before, after the divorce, from what I'd heard. We were all cramped in that trailer. Everyone was laughing and cutting up, jabbing and jawing at each other, loud, boisterous, just a typical day on the farm, as I recalled it anyway. By now, I'm really churning inside, and all the while I'm praying, God, give me the words and give me the strength. Keep them here, dear Lord. Keep them here. And all of a sudden, we hear a clap of thunder that rocked the world that day. And then the bottom fell out of the sky. In a trailer, when the bottom falls out, you can hardly hear yourself think. Most everyone got up saying, oh, they had to go, they had to get going, they had to get going. I was shrinking, thinking, no, God, they can't leave. I haven't had a chance to even tell them yet. Stop them, Lord, just stop them. Someone opened the door and quickly shut it back. When you looked out, you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. Talk about the miracle storm. Remember that God of impossibles I was talking about? I had a captive audience for the next hour. The rain would subside sometime during that period, but no one cared. My family sat spellbound as I went around to each one of them individually and asked for forgiveness where I had failed them, and then told each of them one by one that I had forgiven them for their acts of commission and omission against me, at least the ones where the shoe fit. I then shared with them the message of forgiveness of Jesus Christ. I had been instrumental in the baptism of each of my siblings prior, as I reminded them, because of the stripes I wore beside the road each Sunday. It was that persistence of attending church that would eventually get all of my family dipped into the Arapahoe River to be immersed into the saving blood of Jesus, save for my baby sister, who was too young. She would be baptized later on by my husband. They would backslide on their promises. That's why we were going through this exercise of the witness again that day. But here I was again, reintroducing them to the same saving blood of the spotless slain lamb. This time I was sharing my testimony, my personal witness of His saving power, my account of how He had freed me from a prison of hopelessness and how His redemption had restored me and made me a whole functioning servant for Him. I poured out my heart to receptive ears and hearts that day. It would be a turning point for some, seeds planted for others. 2 of my brothers would seek rehabilitation from drugs and alcohol. My sister, who was closely connected with them, both in distance and relationship, would play a huge part in the healing process for them. But years down the road, they each have found, in some small way at least, the saving grace of Christ Jesus. Perhaps some of them, including my dad, will never be released from their silent prisons because they have failed to forgive themselves for the pain they heaped upon others. All the way home that day for 4 hours, I praised my God. I was still numb from the miracle storm. Oddly enough, though not a bit surprising, there was no sign of rain beyond a mile of where we were. Sunny, hot, and not a drop had fallen anywhere else. And the most beautiful part was, it had stopped raining in my heart. There was no longer a heavy cloud hanging over it, smoldering me, smothering me, and canvassing my countenance. When you hear the words, "Forgiveness is for you," it truly is. Only then are you able to move on, to unbuckle that seatbelt and move about the plane with ease. I'm rarely on an airplane these days and hear that message come across from the pilot that I don't relate the freedom I experienced that day. You're free to move about in the present. That was a real step into the present for me that day. I had completely turned in the striped suit that I kept under my white robe. Satan would no longer claim a stronghold in that area of my life again. I could love my parents and my brothers again. My sister, being the baby, was pretty pristine in all the muck. She just endured a lot, like myself. I've managed to have a relationship with each of them, not so much my dad. I'd be less than honest if I said we were chums, but certainly I am civil to him when we cross paths. And I've been able to sit down and talk with him in depth about his relationship with Christ since that time. I had freed myself from the past years before, but until that day, I had been a fugitive in the present. I was only an escapee, a prisoner on the run on any given day. I didn't want to be in hiding any longer. I wanted to belong to today. I wanted to be effective for Christ. I wanted to use my talents to make a difference in someone else's life. He was calling me to greater service. I had to keep my eyes on the goal, that target in front of me. Remember Lot's wife in Genesis 19? Of course you do. We all know that sad story. My husband and I had the opportunity to visit the Dead Sea and actually floated it and get a sulfur bath and mud pack. It was awesome. But to stand at the Dead Sea and the land surrounding what was Sodom and Gomorrah is amazing. It's Salt Lake City 1,000 times over. It is truly beautiful barrenness. You can look out amongst the vastness of that area and see scads of pillars of salt that have accumulated from the evaporation of the water. To me, these pillars were vertical symbols of disobedience by Lot's wife. They're reminders of what we can become when we try to hold on to things that God purges from our life. We keep looking back when He warns us of the inherent dangers. We may not turn into a pillar of salt, but we become immobile in His kingdom. He calls us to be salt of the earth, not a briny reflection of our past. You see, I didn't want to be a part of that chain gang any longer. I wouldn't settle for that. I didn't want to be in that place, constantly looking over my shoulder to see if my past was catching up to me, nor even looking back to see what was left behind. No longer would the memories take me by surprise. No longer would the hurts take my heart captive and leave my emotions amuck. No longer would the torment sneak in at night and arrest my peaceful slumber. No longer would I wear the cloak of the present on top of the stripes of the past. I was done. It was finished. Through the grace, mercy, and strength of Jesus Christ, I had overcome. I want you to hang on to your papers until next week's program. You can put them in a Ziploc baggie if you'd like, but hang on to them. And while they're in your sight, remember that if we keep holding on to these ugly, stained, trampled on papers of our past, we've only escaped, but not truly freed ourselves. We're just convicts on the run. Who do we think we're fooling by wearing the face of a Christian while our prison clothes are exposed? The world? We're not. Our fellow Christians? Perhaps for a while. Perhaps. Our family? They know us better than most. Ourselves? We may even fool ourselves for a while, but we know when it drags us down. And do we really think we're fooling God? Please. My miracle storm was a loud and clear message from God. It was as though He was saying to me, I'm still answering your prayer. It didn't just bounce off the ceiling. It made it straight to my ear. I've only just begun with you, my child. I will continue to answer that prayer until you come home to me. From that day forward, I began walking in the indisputable knowledge that God was sustaining me. I no longer lived as a fugitive in the present. I began realizing the fullness of His blessings. Psalms 91:5 tells us, You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. Wow, what richness when you live in the Lord. He held the key that unlocked that one last shackle that had held me hostage to an unforgiving spirit all those years. I finally got it. It finally registered, and I connected all the dots. He not only stood beside me, He shored me up. He was not only my rear guard, He was on the front lines for me all along. It was a magnificent power I had tapped into. I knew at that defining moment in my life there was nothing that my God couldn't handle if I but asked and then believed. But there's still even more depth to the story of getting past the past. Next week we'll begin the segment on pardon for the future. Don't miss it. Until then, I'm in battle for His cause and seek your prayers. May God bless your life, your marriage, and your home.